Good evening. Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Calvin. I'm the Director of Women in Their Work, and I'm so happy to have you all here. It feels really joyful and celebratory for us all to be together, especially on a dark, cold night. But this will be such a treat for us to talk about Beverly Penn's new book. Her work actually is behind this screen. She's part of this show, which is First Impressions, and it is a collaboration between Women in Their Work and Flatbed Press. So there are 30 artists and 49 pieces, and after we talk, we'll turn on all the lights and you can check it out again. So anyway, welcome, welcome. So I want to introduce briefly, Kathryn Blair Moore from Flatbed Press, and Celeste Wickenhut from San Antonio, French and Michigan Press, who published the book. So let me just let them have a few remarks and then we'll go from there. And Beverly and then Dana Friis-Hansen is our interlocutor. Yes, he will be in conversation with Beverly, and I will introduce them much better in just a second after these two people speak. So sorry. Anyway, we were trying to make this very smooth and seems to not quite have gone. But anyway, let me invite Kathryn to speak briefly.
Hello, thank you for coming, and I am so pleased to be here and to be able to show some work with artists I've collaborated with over at Flatbed Press for the last 35 years, one of which is Beverly Penn. And I just have to say how much I enjoy collaborating with Beverly. She's no newbie to collaboration. She's easy to collaborate with. I love how we've been able to work together through the years. Her work, as was mentioned, is behind the screen, and we look forward this next year to doing a new collaboration. So thank you for coming, and I hope to visit with you all later after the talk.
Hi, I'm Celeste with French in Michigan. We're based in San Antonio, Texas, and we're just so honored to have published this book with Beverly Penn. It is our 11th book, but really our first that kind of spans so many years. It's a 30-year publication, and it feels extra special to be here at Women in Their Work. We have always really loved following along with Women in Their Work's mission. 90% of the artists that we publish have been women, and we have seen through their catalogs how they prioritize writing and how they prioritize supporting an artist's work through publishing on their catalogs. And so it's really nice to be in a collaborative evening tonight, but to also have such similar priorities in terms of getting the message of artists' work out there. And beyond publishing just art historical or curatorial writing, we really prioritize other perspectives. And so you'll see in the publication that we have a conversation with a botanist. And so we're always really exploring an artist's work beyond just simply the people within the art community, but how an audience looks at the subject matter that an artist is exploring, whether it's botany or the invisible labor of women or whatnot. And so we're just really pleased to have the publication available for you guys tonight and to enjoy this conversation with Beverly and Dana. Thank you.
So the books are in the back, the books that will be signed, and I think Beverly might sign some afterwards. So I want to start with a little show and tell because you just have to. This is Beverly Penn's work when she had a show. She had a show at Women in Their Work in 1994. And so this is her work. She has a solo exhibition. So it'll be fun to see how this work developed into some of the early pieces that are mentioned in the book, and then onto the work that she's been doing for the last, just I would say recently, but that might be about 30 years, so probably 25 years since she's worked in a different scale. So let me begin. So Beverly. She has, her work is included in a number of museums, foundations, corporations. So I want to just give you a broad sense of where all she is. She's in the collection of the National Museum of Women in the Arts, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, the Cooper Hewitt, the Smithsonian Design Museum, Philadelphia Museum of Art, and it's very impressive. She also was in other spaces as well. She was named the Artist of the Year 3D in 2017 by the Texas Commission on the Arts. She received a Fulbright and went to Barcelona. We're not jealous, but that's pretty great, right? And then she also is a full professor at Texas State University. And her work really does speak to the fragility of the natural world and how that reflects social injustice and how the way we react to our world and how that has played out. So we're so pleased to have Beverly here. So Dana, which many of us, I know a lot of you have known Dana for many years. We're so pleased to have him back in Austin for brief time. He is itinerant, going, or the other way to say it, he's a wonderful traveler, spending a lot of time in Japan and in other places throughout the world. Dana's work right now is really kind of connecting artists and communities and critics. He himself has been a museum director, a critic, a writer, very versatile. And he came recently in 2023 from the Grand Rapids Art Museum. And for that, he was the director of the Austin Museum of Art for 12 years. Yes. So very wonderful combination of experiences, and it is wonderful that we all are coming back around again to visit and to know each other. So this is now it's live streamed on Instagram, and then it will also be on our website, archived on our website. So anyway, join me in welcoming Beverly and Dana to one another.
Thank you, Chris. And let's see if the mic will pick us up, or whether we need to pass it back and forth. But
can you all hear okay?
okay. Well, thank you to the entire staff of Women in the Work, to everyone who's turned out on this kind of chilly night. But it's so meaningful to see so many familiar faces and sort of, I think, Beverly's fan base.
And yours, I must say. It's been really a small little pause in Austin's art history without Dana and with Mark. So we're really grateful that we can do that.
Well, the point of this tonight, Mark asked me, what do you want to accomplish? One is, I said, sell books. Also, and I'll tell you why the books they're going to fly off the table. But also to illuminate some of the amazing things that Beverly has done over the course of her career, but also how the book pulls that all together. Because mine has 100 post-it notes. Like, I like this idea. Didn't that writer have an interesting take on this? But also Beverly's vision and voice is included. So I wanted to get things rolling, but just give you a little bit of how this is going to run. Beverly has put together a slideshow that covers most of the work that is featured or bodies of work that's featured in the book. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. So it's not specific to any particular exhibition or thing. It's a tickler for your eyes. Also, that as you're listening to the conversation, save your questions because we're going to do a short Q&A. And so we're going to try to make sure that there's plenty of time for some good questions, and we'll talk about that. But also, finally, I want to say in sort of my opening comments is that the screen will be removed, so you'll get to see Beverly's work in print, or several examples in person. And I always say that it's always better to see a work in its real form rather than as a projection or in a book, even in a book. But the book photography is great. So I've had the privilege of working with Beverly on a number of times. knowing her in the community, she's very active and involved in different organizations. But I first worked with her on a project that was an installation at the Austin Museum of Art when there was a downtown space in 823 Congress. Now the Austin Museum of Art is merged with Art House and is known as the Texas, the Contemporary Austin, TCA. It's still TCA, but it's the Contemporary Austin, which is thriving as an organization. And in fact, I'll just say, if you want to hear more of me talking, on Sunday at 2, I'm going to be talking about the artist Carl Chang, who's an artist who I had a curatorial connection with in 1988. So,
And it's a fabulous show.
So,
It's really great.
absolutely, and it's the final week, and that's the final day. Anyway, I had the privilege of working with Beverly and also with Jill Bedgood on a project that was called At the Edge of Paradise. And it was on view in 2023 at the Austin Museum of Art, the Irving Art Center before that. And I also worked on a project, an exhibition that was at Laguna Gloria that was called Laguna Gloria Grounded, the thematic exhibition. And she created a specific work for that, which will pop up in this slideshow. So my question to you is, can you tell a little bit of the background of those pieces? Specifically, 'cause when we were talking, you said that At the Edge of Paradise was a springboard for many of the ideas and the work that appears in the book.
It's true, because there were some cast-bronze botanical pieces in that installation. And I think it will come up potentially while we're on this question, because I'd love for you to see it. But interestingly, the exhibition that I had at Women in Their Work in 1994 was one of the first ones that I did where there was an immersive, large-scale, architectural-sized group of work that viewers needed to walk in and among. And that was a really important time in my career, because I was also interested in those idealized spaces of architecture, but also the garden and the ideas that from paradise, and the idea of geography. So I did a lot of work that was, again, viewers would walk through and among. But at the Edge of Paradise had these tokens of, I called them garden experiments that were clamped to big architectural structures. And they were sort of mechanical versions of gardens. And that's when I first started thinking about the garden as a space that is a merger between architecture, science, technology, and nature. You have a border between wilderness and civilization. And those ideas were kind of larger scale ideas about expansive visions. But then in working with that, I became a lot more interested in those individual ecosystems within those larger installations. And then especially the compromised ecosystems that are starting to become much more prevalent. And within that context, it made more sense for me to have a more intimate experience for viewers and not such a big immersive, somewhat challenging space to be in, but a more quiet, meditative space for people to maybe, there we are. So the garden experiments are attached to each of the columns on a peristyle courtyard. And to be honest with you, this nature does serve as a model for this column and arch architecture. Think of trees and their canopies. So it is initially a model, and then it made sense to put these garden experiments on them. So the work gradually moved down to much more intimate scale.
That's a great introduction. Well, we're here to celebrate the book and discuss this wonderful book as in my opinion, it's a creative accomplishment in itself. And I've served as a curator, and I don't know if anyone of you have been curators or organized a show before, raise your hand, but you know what it's like. It's putting ideas together. It's thinking visually. It's reaching out and thinking about the visitor or viewer experience. And so what Beverly and the people associated with this book have done is really do a spectacular presentation in a different format. So I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about the book and how it came to be. Starting off, why are we here tonight? Who do we have to thank?
Well, I don't know an artist that doesn't want to do a book. Well, I don't know an artist that doesn't want to have a book, but many people don't want to do a book, and I don't know if I ever want to do another one. I'll say that. But no, it was kind of an amazing situation. I got a Tiffany grant in 2017, and in previous grants that I had received, I put it in my art account and bought supplies. I needed them. I had to pay rent. I had to buy this equipment. And I thought, I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to just try to envision an opportunity to make a book. And I had known, this was, I guess, that really idea came to fruition about 2018. And I had known artists who had done some books. And I had no connections. I'd never done a book. And I thought, well, and the first thing I did was approach a colleague of mine, M. Wright, who's an amazing designer, amazing book designer, and she agreed. I thought, okay, I've got it now. And then we're going to talk about writers in a few, but I picked a couple of writers who I really wanted to write about my book, and I thought, okay, let's go. And as I got into it, and there started to be all the details, and it started to, I thought back, and I should have remembered that when my kids were little, toddlers, and we were hauling them around, and in their diaper bag, I stuck all the books that were supposed to be, the easy ones, the paperback, they don't weigh too much, and they're amusing. The favorite book was How to Make a Book. That was the favorite one. And it outlined from start to finish. I know I have a picture of it. I couldn't find the book, sadly, it's not here anymore. But the first thing that is on the cover is How to Make a Book. And it's a graphic novel, and it has 32 pages or so. And each page has at least, 12, 15 little bits of each step. That's like 384 steps to make a book, which I had forgotten entirely, right?
Oops.
But the more important thing was on the back cover, which I printed off of Amazon, this is an illustration by someone, a leaky, who did a whole series here, at any rate. It says, who made this book? Whoops. And then the caption is, we all did. There are 12 people here. I had 3. And I thought, how am I going to go forward here? So that led to, I'll keep that part short, but that led to inviting many people, but primarily Celeste back in Upper French in Michigan, who took on the project. And it was really, I was so grateful because as we moved forward, it became incredibly detailed with the photographer and the editor and the proofreaders and the photo separators. And that's actually how I got started, was under the impetus of French Michigan. So thank you, Celeste.
So tell us how you identify the writers, because there's some brilliant, wonderful writers.
Well, that's always a hard thing, because I think that artist-writer relationship is super special. You guys, I know a lot of you have worked with writers before, and don't you feel like you learn about your work when things get written about it? It was so special. And I had decided with that book that what I'd like to do is to engage people who I'd never worked with before. And I've had some pretty remarkable stuff written about my work, among them Friis-Hansen's essay from the museum. And I brought copies of that brochure, so I'm happy to share that with everyone. It's back there on the table behind the book. But it's an incredible essay. The brochure is honest, that's true. The essay is really Suzanne Ramljak, who works for the American Federation for the Arts, but she'd been editor of Sculpture Magazine and Metalsmith Magazine, and she had just published a book and done an exhibition called Natural Wonders, the Sublime in Contemporary Art. 13 artists work with nature. It seemed perfect, especially because she also included a special essay that Mark Dion wrote, who's one of my favorite artists, so that made sense. And so she wrote about it, and you'll see from the contemporary perspective. And especially also bringing in lots of things about botany and the natural world, which was really wonderful. And the second writer was Kathryn Blair Moore, who's an art historian, and she's a preeminent medieval Renaissance scholar, and I was unsure at first about that work until I understood that she's the preeminent world scholar on the arabesque, this form, right, that you see everywhere. And I thought, okay, this is a match for sure. And that work I had, that started to appear in my work after the Fulbright in Spain and studying Moorish architecture. But more importantly, she put that together and is working on a book right now that also connects that arabesque form, which we typically associate with Islamic art, actually has a European influence or was actually lifted by the Europeans and publicized by the Europeans from the Islamic world. So it's going to be a great book. She was the second one. And then thirdly, there's an essay, it's conversation actually, by a botanist, Tanisha M. Williams. I would never have thought to include a botanist, but Celeste, that's where you have an editorial publisher because they see things you wouldn't think about. And so I knew a lot of botanists from having worked with them over the years, but I wanted a little more than just the scientific aspect. I wanted there to be sort of an ethnobotanist who was interested in climate change and who was interested in the things that I was interested in terms of the natural world being in peril, not just the scientific part. And I also happen to be a Texas master naturalist, and Tanisha Williams is a naturalist also, and he's the inventor of Black Botanist. And my chapter actually participated in their 2020 symposium. So Celeste made the cold call, and she accepted. So that was a really remarkable relationship to have and build.
And then a good chunk of one of my favorite, I'll admit, parts of the book is the plates and these gorgeous photographs and introductions to each section. But I was surprised because I trained as an art historian, and I think in one direction and art history in another, which is always fun. But what surprised me was that the order of the plate sections was not chronological, starting in the beginning, but starting with the most recent work. And I quizzed her on that. She had a very good answer.
I wanted to show you what interested me most at this moment. It's a new perfect sense, but Celeste also, as an art historian, said, well, typically it's done this way. But I felt really strongly about presenting that work first. And then I thought, but we often meet someone in the present and build backwards by learning about their history. So it made sense, but I understand. Yeah, presenting history goes in particular order.
And it's a treat, and it makes sense once you explain it. Well, shifting gears a little bit, I want to talk about the primacy of plants. In the introduction, Celeste states that your work, quote, foregrounds the fundamental role of plants to human life. In the first essay, Suzanne Ramljak declares, plants have become the main protagonists in Penn's art for the past 30 years. And in the interview with botanist Tanisha Williams, she reminds us that we often, quote, forget that we are not separate from nature, pointing out this is one very strong reason why we're having an environmental crisis. So can you bring us back to the time when you realized that plants would be so important in your work, and also why humans are considered alongside?
You know, through our process of thinking about this, I've so enjoyed the way you led my brain around with your questions, and I love the way you phrased that question because you said, when you realized. You didn't say when you decided, but and all the artists in the room, I know, suddenly, you're making work and you don't decide to do a certain thing a certain way, or maybe you do, but it takes its own life, and you're following around behind it a lot of times, and then catching up and stuff like that. But I love how you put that thought process together. And I'll just share a tiny, fast, kind of biographical twist that sort of brought me here, and I'll just admit straight up, I grew up on a farm from the beginning, and I was dealing with plants my whole life. I grew up with them. My maternal grandparents were florists. There were big greenhouses behind their house. And what I learned, but later in life, was that my maternal grandmother was a Rosie the Riveter. She made brass bombshell casings in World War II. So plants and metals have always been this thing that have been completely familiar to me because my grandmother continued to make aluminum screens in the harrowing Baltimore aluminum screen industry factories. So those actual examples and models have always been with me. Now, I think we all bring our biographies with us when we make work, or we write, or we travel, or we cook, or all those things, those creative efforts. And so that it became the vehicle, more or less.
Well, that's great, and that kind of leads into the next question. So that's a connection in your life. But another thing, when you and I were considering the areas of inquiry for conversation, we spoke about what I call dualities or dynamic tensions. I think we settled on dichotomies that energize you and energize the work. So can you talk a little bit about some of them, some that you see, some of them that I see, for example, are permanence and impermanence, presence and absence, visible and invisible. But when you think about this, you had some of your own understanding.
Yeah, and I loved it. When Dana asked that question, I thought, oh my gosh, he's just actually articulated what is the essence of all art, right? Those tensions. And
For all good art.
there you go. So my process, which I don't, if anybody's interested in that, it's all in the book. But it's a lost plant process. So in order to get the forms that I work with, I have to lose the original. So there is an absence and a presence that's essential for the work to come to be, and which leads to the negative positive space. But also, there's within that a subcontext of that absence presence is the idea of light and shadow, because although these photographs show very little shadow, just so you can see the images, that when they're installed, the shadows become a really second composition. So I have to be really careful about the light, so a lot of you do when you're making work. What direction it's coming from, what color it is, and how intense it is. So those two things are important. And then, I don't know, I had written a couple of things down that came to me about structure and how the structure of the work and the difference between something that there's a point in history where we started to, at least during modernism, we started to not pay attention to ornamentation and what things looked like, but the sort of structural aspect of the natural world and how that all comes together and how it would all, where it's not just a simple result of a logarithmic or algorithmic output, but we all came back to putting together structures of things. So I think structure and ornament start to be like things I always balance when I'm working on things.
Well, you're mentioning ornament is an interesting one, and it kind of leads into my next question. Because earlier we were talking about how the book illuminated many different entry points. And I know the serious aspirations for your work. And I was curious what you thought if people were describing your work with beauty. And your quick response was, beauty is a blessing and a curse. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? Some of the conversations that have been going on in the past 20 years.
I know,
or even more.
It's such a great question, and it led Dave and I to have conversations about this, about Dave and Hickey's book. When you brought Dave and Hickey to the Austin Museum of Art, and this book was like early 90s, and it's on beauty, and having brought beauty to the forefront, we'll say, art criticism in the 90s was like cutting off your head if you were an art critic.
There was this tension between, he said, choosing beauty over content or choosing beauty as content is always an act of sedition.
Really? But the interesting thing is I didn't stop because do you ever know that Elaine Scarry wrote a book that like maybe 5 years later, I'm not saying it's directly influenced by that, but it was called On Beauty, right? On Beauty for and Justice or at any rate. It's
Ethics.
yes, I think that's right. It was a discussion, and it centered around Robert Bainbrook's work. The whole discussion of what that meant. But one thing that Hickey wrote was that there's a big difference between beauty and what is beautiful. And he defined it in this essay that Dana was brought up, and it was so good to go back to my book and see like what I wrote in the margins then and what interests me now. But he talked about beauty being the not a thing. He didn't say what it was, but he said it's not a thing, whereas the beautiful is a thing. And so I alluded to it from my perspective, the kind of superficiality, and I think more like ornament would be the case. But okay, I have to read this other quote that Hickey quotes Baudelaire. So
Who?
Baudelaire.
Baudelaire.
Uh-huh.
He would know something.
Yeah, that's right.
He has something to say.
Yeah, and it's as Baudelaire says, the beautiful is always strange, and then Hickey interprets that as saying, by which he means, of course, that it's always strangely familiar. And I got the feeling from that about it being kind of sort of threatening but seductive in a way that seems challenging but thrilling nonetheless. And you had mentioned also something I had unfortunately kind of glossed over a little bit in Kathryn Moore's essay
Right.
about
An
uncanny beauty. And I think that's what is motivating me most in making work, is having that unsettling beauty feeling, like the world's gone awry. Because none of these pieces exist in nature, even though they look totally real. So I want that kind of tension of them looking just sort of like not real, but disturbed, having a mind of their own, taking over, possibly blanketing us all as viewers.
Well, I've got two more questions, then we're going to turn it over to the audience. But you said taking over and uncanny and strangeness. And this is a theme that we talked about 20 years ago. When you created, maybe you can talk about creating the piece that was shown in an exhibition that was specifically for Lumina Gloria. You talked to me about weeds. So what is it? What's up with weeds?
Well, they're the counterpoint to beauty, right? Because we hate them. Look, they're maligned. We're in competition with them all the time. And it was important to me to try to build into that work, which it's so seductive to get dealing with those swirls and those patterns, to have a counterpoint that is going to announce these things as not beautiful. So if you look at these slides, these are really would not leave the foundry in any way, because there's still investments stuck inside of them. So they're largely rough and unfinished in surface and texture, and in need of the malign weeds, which I have to harvest as live plants by the side of the road before they get mowed down, because they're not liked, and they are invasive, and we have a one-way understanding of invasive species. And my feeling about that as a naturalist is there are other ways of looking at it besides the fact that they are merely taking over our spaces. Because weeds, by the way, is not an etymological term. It's not, it is an etymological term. It's not a botanist term. It's a category that we've developed by language. Weeds, though, and invasive species are in a botanical category called disturbance-loving species. That's a real thing. And yeah, and those are like, I feel like as artists we're all disturbance-loving species in a way. So that pulled me right in. But yeah, you'll see like where they go in Montana, where they're making roads for gas. Gas pumps, natural gas sites. My husband's here. He's an environmental scientist. He can tell you that. Anyway, aerial views of this. They haven't been built. Aerial views of that cleared land in bloom season. The thistles you see, they're all purple because the thistles have come in and they stabilize the soil. They hold moisture, right? They're great for pollinators. So we just have this, like, we don't have a nuanced relationship with weeds. So part of what I'm hoping to do, potentially, is to have that question stay afloat and make them so extraordinarily beautiful that people get pulled in and then get repulsed because they're got weeds.
That's wonderful. I've got one more question, and we've talked a lot about what's in the book. But what I want to know is what's on your horizon, or maybe if you're willing to do, what would be in the next book? What do you have up your sleeve? What do you have in the planning stages that we can look forward to?
I don't have the next book in my planning stages. Yeah, that's for sure. We have lots of things. Well, we'll be working with Kathryn at some point in the very near future. And I'm going to have a solo exhibition, and this is great news, in a year from now, because I'm going to be celebrating my last year of full-time teaching, which is really exciting, and I can move full-time into the studio, which is really exciting. And then I'm going to do a residency in the fall. It's going to be really exciting, and Kathryn, I'd love to talk to you about this. It's at Castle House Art Colony in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and they're on 20 acres of untouched land. Of course, it's not landscape I'm familiar with, but I'll be doing a series of prints with pigments from there, and also direct method casting from some of the landscape and pairing those together. So it's a little undefined at this point, but the big part about that is I'm going to be working with the Duke University Herbarium, which is a really important herbarium that is it's being threatened to be dispersed. It's one of the largest in the United States, one of the largest in the world, actually. And so part of their outreach is they've let me come into their collection and look at hundreds of years old of collected specimens by botanists and artists. So it's really exciting.
Great. Well, we are running a little over, but if it's okay with the owners of the director, can we have a few questions from them? Okay. Who has a question? And that wasn't on the schedule, but
well, what are you working on right now? And it's so great to have you back and to have this, and we're so grateful for your insight and to be here. Tell us what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I'm looking backwards at past work that I've done and organizing my archives and revisiting the key elements of what I had done as a curator, as a writer, in the different places that I lived at the different times. So the talk that I'm preparing for the Contemporary Austin next Sunday looks at this wonderful retrospective that the curator, Alex, has done. That's a survey of, and a surprising survey by Carl Chang, an artist who's been working over 50 years in Southern California. I was a curator and worked with him in 1988. So there's one of the projects that I did when I was working at the MIT List Visual Arts Center. So it's very interesting for me, and also re-examining and visiting Japan, where I worked from 1991 to 95, and going back to lead tours with Mark Holzbach from Tiny World Tours, but also to meet with the artists that I used to know and meet with new artists, to explore what are the connections and what are the possibilities of cross-pollinating the generations, but also between Japan, with a special focus in Japan and connecting the United States. So that's the short answer. So, and hopefully more writing and things like this. This is really meaningful. So, but let's hear some questions from the audience. And what I'll do is I'll bring them, or we'll bring the mic halfway, so that because. Okay, this is halfway. Any questions? Thoughts? Or we can go right to the book signing and the social hour. Okay.
How long did you work on the book?
So the question is, how long did you work on the book?
That's a good question. Well, I think Celeste came on board in 2019. Is that right?
2020.
2020. So I got the grant in 17. It didn't really get to me for a while. You know how those things go. And then I just played around with the idea and sort of shuffled along with my thought, I'm going to do this by myself idea for a year. And then Celeste came on board. And it just came out in the spring of 2024. So it was a long time. I don't know if they normally take that long. I don't think so. Do they, Celeste?
Depending on the amount, a year to 3 years is about right. But we had a lot of content.
We had a lot of content. Thanks for asking that.
So I had a question about the lost plant technique. Can you elaborate on that, and where do you do that? And, yes, tell us more.
Well, actually, it's outlined in detail in the book, very much. But
in a very good form, accessible way.
Right, it's not typical, but it's a corollary to the lost practice process.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll go talk to you more about that.
Yeah.
Are you planning to do more public artwork?
The question is, are you planning to do more public artwork? We have a live audience on the internet that we've got to make sure they hear the question.
Yes, okay. Not at present, not at present. It's very consuming. The ones I've done take years, and it's hard to do anything else but those. So, and the people that are really good at it, like our friends Martin Sawyer or Lou, they have a whole team of people that help with that. And it's hard for me to work like that. There's a piece in the presentation in San Diego, and I'm in the field with the guys laying the tiles down and, putting the leaves together, working in the foundries, putting things up. So for me, I'm not sure I'm necessarily the artist that's suited for public art. I love seeing the result, but the process is pretty consuming. Have you done some yourself?
No.
It can be really wonderful. Especially AIPP here in Austin is incredible.
Just as a musician.
Oh, they're amazing. Honestly, I just was on a panel and they're incredible. They really are.
Okay, one more question. If we go. Yes.
The whole arabesque series, they almost read as drawings. They have this wonderful, sort of doodled quality. And I know that's just the natural form, but I wondered, did that affect your drawing, or do you ever draw these plants yourself? What role does drawing have in your sculpture?
So, to repeat the question, responding to the arabesque qualities, what role does drawing have in your sculpture?
I don't draw the pieces out in planning, but I do a lot of drawing of plants. And, but rarely do I draw plants with the idea of then making sculptures from those drawings. Because it is like drawing though, so that's a really, really important point. I just draw on the wall and bend things around, because I just have the little parts, put them together and draw, and if it doesn't work, I can cut them apart, put them back together, but they are like line exploration, so that's true.
Great. Well, I hate to say this, we have to end this here, but there's time to talk more with Beverly as she's signing books. And with me, I'll be circulating around. But anyway, let's have a big hand for and Flatbed Press, and please take this serious look at all the wonderful art that's on the wall. So, thanks very much.